Oh, hello there, and thanks for joining Uncomplicated Math today. Today we're going to be looking at how to divide whole numbers. And by the end of this video, you'll know the steps involved when dividing a whole number by a one-digit divisor. So let's get started. So in question number 1, we're being asked to divide 46 by 3. So looking over to the right-hand side here under our steps involved, we can see that our first step is to set up the equation. Because the way that it's currently written, it would be quite challenging to work through this division problem. And whenever we write out a division problem, we're going to begin by writing our dividend, or the number that's being divided, underneath our division bar. And in this question, our dividend happens to be 46, so we're going to write it underneath our division bar. And next, we're going to write our divisor, or the number that's doing the dividing, which in this case happens to be 3, so we're going to write the divisor to the left and on the outside of our division problem. And once we actually start working through this, our answer, or our quotient, is going to be recorded on top of our division bar. But whenever you're setting up a division problem, make sure that you leave yourself lots of space underneath so that you actually have room to work through the multiple subtraction operations we're going to be doing as we move on to step number 2, where we're going to be working through our division steps. So since we've set up the equation, we can move on to step number 2, where we're going to begin the step-by-step process of dividing whole numbers. So we're going to divide, multiply, subtract, bring down, and repeat that process from left to right in order for us to actually divide these numbers. And I know that that sounds like a lot, but as we start to work through this, you're going to see that it's actually not as complex as you think it might be. So we're going to start by dividing from left to right. So we're going to begin by dividing 4 by 3. Or we're going to think, how many groups of 3 can I make out of 4? And I know that I can make one group of 3 out of 4, so I'm going to write the 1 above the 4 here to show that I'm dividing 4 by 3. So now I can move on to my next division step, which is to multiply. So I'm going to multiply 1 times 3, which we know gives us 3. So now we can move on to the next step, which is to actually subtract here. And we're going to subtract 3 from 4, which gives us 1. And now we're going to move on to our next step, which is to bring down the next number to the right. Or we're going to bring down the 6 here, and we're going to show that using an arrow, giving us 16 for our next step, where we're going to repeat this process. But this time, we're not going to be dividing 6 by 3. We're going to be dividing 16 by 3. Or how many groups of 3 can we make out of 16? And we know that we can make 5 groups of 3 out of 16. So we're going to record our 5 up top here. And next, we're going to move on to our next step, which is to multiply. So we're going to multiply 5 times 3, which we know gives us 15. So we're going to go ahead and write the 15 there. And we're going to move on to our next step, which is to subtract. So we're going to subtract 15 from 16, which we know gives us 1. So now that we've worked through this problem all the way to the ones place, we can't bring the numbers down anymore. So we're actually done with this division problem. So now we're going to move on to step number 3, which is to record any remainders. And we can see here that we have 1 left over here. So the remainder is obviously the number that's left over after we've completed our division problem. So our answer wasn't a perfect whole number, so we need to express that somehow, and we express that by showing an R before the number. So when we record our answer of 46 divided by 3, we have 15 with a remainder of 1. So now we're going to move on to question number 2, where this time we're being asked to divide 125 by 5. So the first step is to set up the equation. So we'll remember that our dividend, or the number being divided, is going to go underneath the division bar. So we will put 125 under the division bar. And next, our divisor, or the number doing the dividing, is going to go to the left and the outside. So now we can move on to step number 2, where we're going to work through our division steps from left to right. But we can see here that we have a bit of a problem, because we can't make a group of 5 out of 1. So we can't actually divide the first number to the far left. So we're actually going to move to the number that's immediately to the right, And now we're going to be dividing 12 by 5 instead. And we know that we can make two groups of 5 out of 12. So we're going to put the 2 up above the 2 instead of above the 1 to show that we've divided 12 by 5 rather than we've divided 1 by 5. So now we can move on to our next step here, which is to multiply. And when we multiply 5 times 2, we get 10. So now we can move on to the next step, which is to subtract. And when we subtract 10 from 12, we get 2. So now we can move on to our next step, which is to bring down the number that's immediately to the right of the place that we've just divided. So we're going to bring down our 5, giving us 25. And now we're going to repeat this process, remembering that we're not dividing 5 by 5, we're actually dividing 25 by 5. And we know that we can make 5 groups of 5 out of 25, so we're going to put the 5 up above the division bar and move on to step number 2 of our division steps, which is to multiply. We're going to multiply 5 times 5, which gives us 25, and then we're going to move on to our next step, which is to subtract. And when we take away 25 from 25, we get 0, and we can't bring down anything further, so we're done with this problem. And since we don't have any remainders here, we're left with a whole number. So when we divide 125 by 5, we get 25. So hopefully by now you understand the steps involved when dividing a whole number by a one-digit divisor. Help make math less complicated by smashing those like and subscribe buttons. As always, enjoy today's math journey.